one of the things that I've realized recently is that if we assume a certain situation is going to happen in a certain way, it usually does. If you assume a person is going to act in a certain way, they usually do. If you assume that a person's rude, that a person's negative, that a person is going to act in a certain way, they probably will. If you think that a situation is not going to go in a good way, it's not going to go in the way that you prefer, it usually will. And so what I'm realizing is that the assumptions that we have about reality will dictate how certain situations happen, how certain people act. It's a big factor to consider in terms of how something's going to go. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you how to change your reality by actually changing your assumptions about reality, changing what you think about how something's going to go. And this can completely transform your life and allow you to manifest things in a completely different way, allow you to completely change your experience and enter realities that you otherwise would not have been able to enter, and also stop certain things from happening that only would have happened because of the assumption that you had beforehand. So if you're new to this channel, what I want you to do is to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, because I do post a new video every single day. Also, if you want to work with me one-on-one personally, hit the link that's in the description box of this video. So the very first thing I want you to understand is that how things go in your life is a lot of the times connected with the assumptions that you have about how it's going to go. You see, a lot of the times we just assume that we know how this situation is going to go. It's like I already have seen it all, right? I already know how this person's going to act. It's like I've already seen how this is going to go. And what's happening there is that if you assume that the situation is going to go in that way based on something that you've experienced in your past, what you're actually doing is you're actually energetically blocking another potential reality that you could have stepped into because you just went into that situation or into that conversation with that assumption, with that subconscious belief. So you're literally blocking realities or just continually repeating realities that you don't want to live in because of the assumption that you might have, right? The unconscious beliefs, the deep-rooted subconscious ideologies that you might have. So it's important to consider, how many assumptions do you have? Have you ever considered, is it just a question, this is just a question, is it possible that certain situations only happened in your life in the past in that way because of your assumptions? Now, maybe not 100% why, but is it a big factor to consider? Think back to when you assumed a certain situation when you assumed that a certain situation was going to go in a certain way. Did it go in that way? Probably. Think back to your whole life. Think back to everything that you've experienced. When you assumed that it was going to go in that way, did it go that way? I'm willing to bet that it did. And it's because our assumptions play a bigger role in our experience than we actually think. And so the first thing I want you to understand, well, the first thing was that our assumptions do actually create our own reality to a very big degree. The first thing I want you to understand after this is just like a pre thing that I wanted to share with you, just like a first point. The actual first point is that we unconsciously have stories, okay? We have stories. We have stories in our minds, and we just think that we just know, we know how it's gonna go, right? And it's not like we're sitting here seeing these stories as like, hey, here I am and there's the story. It's like, hey, I have a story in my mind. It's like, no, when you have a story in your mind that's unconsciously playing out, it's not that you're sitting here being aware that you have a story in your mind and it's like, oh, there's my assumption, there's the story. No, it's just so unconscious that you don't even realize that it's a story, and you actually become the story. So it's not like here I am as, spacious consciousness, who I truly am, this formless observer looking at the story. It's like, no, actually, it's like you have a story of the fact that you're a victim, right? That you're a victim in this life. It's not that you have a story of victimhood, it's that you become a victim. You think that reality is working against you. You just assume that. You just assume. It's like you assume people are rude. You assume reality is working against you. And then so it does. It does work against you. And it's because you have a story. You believe, you have this assumption that people are going to act in a certain way. You have that unconscious story that you're identified with. You're actually attached to that story. It's not that you see yourself as the true spacious awareness that you are, the true consciousness that you are. And observing the story, you just become you become the story that you play out. You become the ideas that you have in your own mind. You're not able to sort of separate your true self from the own story that you have in your mind. And so this is really the first step. Like, this is the first actual step to changing your reality by changing your assumptions, is just be aware that you have very powerful stories in your mind. And it's like your true power, of course, is the consciousness that you are. But just understand that you probably have so many assumptions, so many stories that are completely unconscious. You're totally identified with those stories. And the second thing I want you to understand in this video, the second thing that is really important for you to understand, is that what is an assumption? An assumption is unconsciousness. The very nature of the word assumption, based on what I realized, is basically that if you assume something to be true, an assumption implies that you're unconscious of something. Assumption means that it's like you didn't consciously decide that you viewed that situation in that way. You just assumed that that's how it's going to go. You just assumed that this is the way that it is. Assumptions are unconscious. Assumptions are unconscious. So if you assume that that person's going to go and act in a very rude way, it's like, that's not that you consciously decided that. You just assumed. It was unconscious. You just assumed that you're a human being. What if you're more than a human being? What if you're not your thoughts? You see, so many people assume that they are just their thoughts, that they are just the body, that they are just the mind. What if that's not true? People just assume that they're a victim. Why? Why do you have to be a victim? They just assume people are rude. Why? When, at what point in your life did you decide that people are rude? And who decided that for you? Because the interesting thing is that a lot of the times we don't realize that our assumptions are completely unconscious. We assume that we're victims. We assume that reality's working against us. Not everybody, but some people do. Now, some people assume good things. They assume that people are very nice, and usually they are. But the key is to realize that a lot of assumptions are unconscious. Now, if we can bring these unconscious assumptions to our own consciousness, if we can actually become aware of the assumptions that we have, because you can't change something, you can't let go of something unless you first bring awareness and consciousness to it. If we can actually become aware of the assumptions that we have, if we can actually become conscious of the assumptions that we have, what is going to happen is something powerful. You now have the ability to actually change the assumptions that you have about reality, about people, about situations, about how certain things are going to go, how this is going to go, how that's going to go. So I want you to understand that the only way to change an assumption is to become conscious of the assumption that you have. So it's like, law of assumption is a powerful assumption that you can actually use to create your reality. You can actually use this understanding of assumptions to actually completely change your reality. You can do it. You can change your whole reality by changing the assumptions that you have about it. And so it's interesting because a lot of people use this as a manifestation technique, and it is a powerful manifestation technique. But the thing is though, imagine you just assume that a certain situation is going to go in a certain way. You start to change your assumptions. Like, you know what, I'm just going to assume that this person is going to act more positive. Even though they've been more negative, I had an assumption that they were negative, so I'm going to, you know what, I'm just going to choose that they're going to be more positive. You see, what that required of you was actually to become conscious of the fact that you first assumed that they are going to be negative. That required of you a conscious awareness of that assumption that you had of how that person was going to be, or how that situation was going to go. And so understand that if you change your assumptions, it's going to change your reality. But the first step is actually to become conscious, become aware. If you truly want to manifest a change in your life, you truly want to change your thoughts to change your reality, you truly want to change your assumptions to change your reality, you got to become conscious of all the stuff in your mind that you're assuming. You got to become conscious of all the stuff that you're just assuming. You're just assuming that's how it is. That's how the situation's going to go. This is how life is. Who decided that for you, and when? When did you decide that people are just rude? When did you decide that? Because it wasn't like that when you were born. Right? At some point you were conditioned to believe that. You were conditioned to believe that things, you know, I mean, if you have that assumption, I don't know if you do, but, you know, some people think, hey, that, you know, these people are just rude. People are, like, strangers are rude. That could be an assumption. When did you decide that? Is it an objective truth in the universe that strangers are rude, or is that an assumption based on conditioning? Based on the way you've lived your life so far? Because if you just keep living in this loop of creating a future based on what you assumed, based on the past, you're going to keep living a reality that's based on the past. And it doesn't have to be that way. To truly create something new is to change your assumptions about reality. And in order to change your assumptions about reality, there's no other way around this, the way that I see it. It's necessary for you to become conscious, to become aware of the assumptions that you have about reality. We need to become more conscious of our stories. We need to become more conscious. And the truth is, you don't need to do anything but test this for yourself. Don't take my word for this. Test it. Notice your assumptions. Notice if you just assume that a family member is going to act in a certain way, or that this situation is going to go on that way. Notice how that's usually what manifests. Become conscious of your stories. Become conscious of your assumptions. And then change them. And leave a comment down below and let me know what happens, because this is very, very powerful stuff that I'm actually sharing with you right now. Now, I'm still learning this just like you are, because I've been really focused recently on consciousness and awareness and spiritual awakening, and assumptions is something that's new to me. But I realized last night actually that assumptions are unconsciousness, and that is when I had a jaw-dropping insight, where I realized that assumptions assume that there's something that we have within us that's completely unconscious. And so I think that this law of assumption, which I'm going to be talking more about on this channel, is deeply, deeply, deeply connected to consciousness and what some people call spiritual awakening. I think that they're deeply connected, and expect more of this on this channel because this is powerful. I think that this has the potential to completely change your entire reality and to change everything, to change your whole life, to change the trajectory of your life, to change how you manifest, to change how you feel. And I think that this is super powerful. So that's all I have for this video. Once again, if you want to work with me one-on-one personally, hit the link that's in the description box of this video to apply for a free consultation. And as always, have yourself a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.